Tom Cotton of Arkansas, thank you very much for being on the show this morning. An important day. Let's start with Syria. What should be the policy moving forward?
Well, there's been another horrific gas attack by Bashar al-Assad on his own people. This happened 4 years ago. I was one of the few Republicans in Congress at the time that supported the president's threat to enforce his red line. I wish he had done it then rather than engage in a deal with Russia that obviously didn't remove their chemical weapons. But now President Trump is the president, not President Obama. And I would counsel him that the policy needs to be what it was stated under the Obama administration but never actually pursued. Bashar al-Assad must ultimately go. That may not be tomorrow. It may not be next week. ISIS may be our more immediate threat from Syria, but we cannot be safe as long as the Assad, Iran, Russia axis is in charge in Syria.
Yeah. Senator Cotton, it's Willie Geist. So how would this declaration that Assad must go be different than from President Obama's declaration? Because he said that many years ago and many, many hundreds of thousands of people had died in the intervening time. How many more times will we see the pictures like we're seeing this morning of children suffocating to death? He doesn't, Assad, as you well know, doesn't respond to strongly worded statements, to UN resolutions, to veiled threats. How is this different?
Well, you're right about that, Willie. We can condemn Bashar al-Assad. We can go to the UN Security Council and let Russia and China veto a resolution. But ultimately, Bashar al-Assad, like Iran, like Russia, responds to pressure and confrontation. You know, for some years, there was much talk of safe zones for Syrian civilians. Given the situation on the ground, I'm not sure that's feasible now. That doesn't mean that we and our allies can't create what you might call unsafe zones for Bashar al-Assad and his forces and his allies in Syria, in addition to bringing more pressure to bear on Iran and Russia in the Middle East and around the world, because they're his main patrons. We shouldn't see Syria as an issue in isolation. We should see it as a part of the broader struggle for mastery in the Middle East. And until we confront those adversaries throughout the Middle East and the world, Bashar al-Assad likely will remain in power.
So, Senator, is what you just called an unsafe zone, is that a euphemism for a place where Assad and his forces might be attacked by the United States?
Well, I don't want to go into all the details, Willie, because some of them might be classified, but it has long been the stated policy of the government that Bashar al-Assad must go. Importantly, that's what virtually all of our Arab allies believe. It's also what millions of Arabs throughout Syria and around the Middle East believe as well. So it's not simply an opinion or a policy that he should go. It's simply a fact on the ground that we could say Bashar al-Assad will remain in power, but millions of Syrians and other Arabs throughout the Middle East are not going to accept that. And it's going to make it harder for us to achieve our goals of destroying ISIS and stabilizing Iraq and confronting Iran as well.
Senator Cotton, Harold Ford, good morning. A two-part quick question. Your colleague, Senator Kaine, was just on saying something similar, that we should create safe zones. You said unsafe zones. Let's take it a step further. Are we prepared as a nation to confront militarily if these zones, however they're defined, are breached by Mr. Assad? And two, what is the overarching doctrine you believe, not only in Syria, but how does this administration and how does the Senate and the Congress react to a White House that seemingly does not have a foreign policy doctrine as it relates to the hottest and most controversial and, frankly, most pugnacious spots around the globe?
Well, Harold, I'm not sure that we can create safe zones for civilians on the ground right now, given the entry of not only Russia, but Turkey and a large Kurdish fighting force. But we can make things less safe for Bashar al-Assad and his forces and his patrons from Iran and Russia. As part of a broader policy, the administration is undertaking
But, Senator, does that mean military action, that we would be willing to take military action? That was the point. Forgive me for the safe and unsafe bad dichotomy there, but does that mean we are prepared to take military action?
I think we have to be prepared to keep all options on the table, whether it's military action or whether it's classified covert activities as well. But ultimately, we cannot expect to be safe ourselves from the threats emanating from the Middle East as long as Bashar al-Assad remains in power.
Mark Halperin.
Senator, just to follow up on Harold's second question, what is the Trump doctrine, as you understand it, towards North Korea, towards Syria?
Well, I think it's probably premature to announce any kind of doctrine, and I think most presidents don't develop doctrines. They confront situations on a practical basis, trying to protect U.S. interests and defend U.S. aspirations. I know the administration is undertaking a policy review process through the National Security Council, and I expect that they'll be reaching a conclusion ultimately. There are differing voices in the administration, I know that, but ultimately President Trump is going to have to make the decision. I would counsel him once again that Bashar al-Assad cannot remain in power and America remain safe from the threats coming from the Middle East.
Senator, bigger picture here, I'm just wondering, across the board, the president's approval ratings are plummeting. I think that's pretty much not up for debate. The numbers are bad. Are you concerned at all that his effectiveness on the world stage is being impacted by his tweets, his behavior, and the apparent disapproval that the American people have for his job in office so far?
Well, poll numbers, Mika, are more a matter of domestic policy and politics. Obviously, foreign leaders read them, but presidents have accomplished important things to keep our country safe while they have pretty bad poll numbers. George Bush in 2007 and 2008 saw his approval ratings dip into 30, maybe even the 20%. Yet that was when he turned the Iraq war around and handed off a relatively peaceful and stable Iraq to Barack Obama. Donald Trump is less than 3 months into his tenure. He's got at least 45 months to go. So he has a long time to turn around whatever kind of political troubles he faces. More broadly around the world, though, we should simply be focused on keeping our country safe and defending our interests. If that's the case, then our adversaries and our allies will understand that America is once again a force to be reckoned with.
Do you wish you would stop tweeting?
The president can tweet, and reach the American people in a way that very few other people have. Presidents adopt new communications techniques. Sometimes I agree with what he says. Occasionally I don't, but that's true whether he says it through Twitter or whether he says it through an interview.
Senator Tom Cotton, thank you.
Thanks, Senator.
Thanks for being on. Coming up, John McCain does what John McCain